Hi, and welcome back to PDA Dad UK. In this episode, I'm going to be reflecting due to World Mental Health Day that was yesterday when I'm recording this, but really it's World Mental Health Week, month, whatever. And when is mental health not important? So in this episode, I'm going to be focusing on my mental health, the mental health of my family, and how these things affect each other. As I say, welcome back to PDA Dad UK. Before I go on, can you go hit like, hit subscribe, and ring the bell? You'll always know when new content's coming up. And I'm really trying to gun towards that 10,000 subscriber mark. So if you can help with that, it would be amazing. As I say in this episode, what I want to look at is World Mental Health Day and reflect on my own mental health journey, as well as the mental health journey my family have been on. And there's been impacts in all sorts of different ways. I'm not a depressive personality, so I don't have any mental health conditions that accompany me. So I'm not, bipolar. I don't suffer with clinical depression or anything like that. But there have been times in my life when I have really struggled with my mental health. And I'm going to tell the story of probably the biggest mental health challenge I had and what I learnt from it. And this was a good few years ago, probably 15 years ago now, back when I was living in Australia. And I was driving home from work one afternoon and just thought I could quite happily go and take this car off the edge of a cliff. Thankfully, I lived in a place in Australia that's like a billiard table. There's no cliffs, no hills, no nothing. So there was no chance of me doing that. But it really struck me that that's how I felt. Thankfully, I'm self-aware enough, I guess, that I was able to recognise this is a really unhealthy place to be. And I reached out and spoke to my boss, and he was great about it. He actually gave me a couple of weeks off work and said, get yourself sorted. I went to my GP and I spoke to them and said, this is where I'm at, this is where things are. And they put me on an antidepressant, and they also referred me for some therapy. And I think it was the therapy that really did help. And I'm going to go into some of the details of what I learned from that therapy, I guess, in the first part of this. And then in a bit, what I'll do is I go on to mental health conditions and the things that have affected my family. So I was referred to the mental health therapy service, and it was, new for me. And I don't know about you guys, therapy is really important, and it's important for many people, but there's sort of a trendy thing that can be associated with it. And I think that's a good thing now. On reflection, I think, hey, if it means people are talking through their problems and talking through their issues, giddy up, go for it. I think it's really important. But for me at that point in time, I had a certain attitude, I guess, towards this kind of thing. And that was reflected in my willingness to go forward and talk about these things. But I was referred, I knew I needed to get something done in my head, sorting it out. And so I went to this therapy. We started reflecting on what brought me there. Now, my family life was fairly disjointed. I'm talking my extended family here. I was still single at the time. And I mean, that played a big part of it. I was, in my 30s, I was still single. There weren't any sort of real prospects or anything like that. I was also massive. So I think I've talked about it here before, but I lost a lot of weight over the last 5-6 years. I've lost 12 stone, and it's a little bit more to go, but I'm really on target, and I brought that into play. But I guess how I felt about myself, my own self-image, my own self-identity was really being affected. I started to open up about that. And it's a really difficult thing. It can be very difficult making yourself vulnerable like that. But actually it was hugely empowering as well. Once I'd started to open up about it, I really started to open up and sort of talked about all these things and the relationships in my life. And I had many friends. That was never an issue. But not having blood family around me, I guess, in that way was something that really affected me. But really it came back to my self-image. And this was something my therapist was able to identify. And he said to me, I think the issue is your self-talk. I'd never thought about this. I'd never really heard the phrase self-talk before. But it was brilliant because what he did was go, so, in these situations, how do you talk to yourself? What do you say about yourself? So in our heads, we've always got this internal monologue going on, haven't we? We think things and we're always sort of talking backwards and forwards to ourselves. I think most people do that. Otherwise, it's probably indicative of my own state. But, realistically, we're always refreshing our own opinions of ourselves and the way that we see ourselves and the things that we think about how others might view us. And of course, I saw myself through the lens of a fat guy. I saw myself through the lens of somebody who was probably unlovable. And the way I talked to myself was reflected back. And I realised I do it quite a lot. And I still do it now. I catch myself every now and again. And it's that thing where if maybe I drop something, you idiot, Casper. It's the first thing I think, you idiot. And that's not cool. I'm not an idiot. I know I'm not an idiot. That moment might have been clumsy or whatever, but that doesn't make me an idiot. The way we talk to ourselves informs how we feel about ourselves. And what he was teaching me was, if we can capture those moments, when you say that, you idiot, and actually think, well, am I? No, I've made a mistake. And allowing an element of grace, self-forgiveness in there to be able to bring that back and be forgiving to yourself and give yourself a break every now and again really made a difference. And we went through this and we started to do with these things, and it led to things like, okay, you are big. How, what can you do about that? Now, my size was largely medical. It was also what I ate and what I drank and all that kind of stuff. But there was a reason medically that I was I couldn't lose weight. I kept going on diets. I couldn't lose the weight. It wouldn't come off. I'd give up. So I just binge on whatever, thinking nothing's worth it. And of course, that just makes it worse, and you put more weight on, and snowball effect, quite literally. It was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Once that was identified, I was suddenly in a position where I could maybe start losing the weight and they could address it. So turns out my thyroid doesn't work properly. My immune system attacks my thyroid, so it doesn't produce. And when they did the test, came back something like 14 times the level of the hormone from the brain telling your thyroid to get working. So it was like, okay, this is an issue. That put me on thyroxine, and that's been something that has really helped. But really, it was about loving who I am and seeing the good qualities in me. And I remember in this process, I was speaking to a really good friend of mine, my best friend at the time. He was the best man at my wedding, and we were talking about this. And he was really frank with me, and he just said, look, the problem is, mate, you see all the crap. When you're self-reflecting, all you see is the negative of you. You fail to see what everybody else is seeing. And he went through to start listing all the great qualities about me. And it was brutally beautiful, is how I'd put it. He was able to address that issue in myself, but also take that on to say, but there's so much more to you. You're so much more than this, and you're actually a beautiful guy. Here's the good things about you. And that, in conjunction with the therapy and having this reinforced, really did make me start to take a step back and actually look at myself and start to accept the good qualities and allow myself that. It feels unhumble, doesn't it, when we start saying, oh, I'm good at this, I'm good at that, I have these qualities. And we're in England now, I live in the UK. The whole British self-deprecating thing is just rife, isn't it? We can't be too bombastic, and we take things with a very, very, we put ourselves down a lot. And thankfully that's not so prevalent in Australia, but that whole thing of you certainly don't big yourself up. I look at the States and their attitude, and there's a real trend to being bombastic and, hey, I'm great at this and I can be good. It can sound really arrogant when you hear it, but actually I think it's a healthy thing that you can start to say that without it being considered that you're just being an arrogant jerk. It makes such a difference. There's a fine line. You don't want to cross that to just, hey, I'm great all the time. I think that self-reflection is important as well. As being, if we can't self-reflect and see our faults, how can we work on them to become better people? But I think the ability to allow ourselves the moments to say, I did really well at that, are really important. And that was what really trickled over into repairing my mental health at that point. It was a really big moment for me. And once I did that, I started to pull myself out of that funk that I was in. Now, of course, as I say, I'm not a I'm not a depressive personality. I don't have any conditions or mental health issues that go alongside that. That was a point in my life where I just hit that rock bottom, and we all hit that, I think, at some point. Most of us do. There's a point in our life where we all think, I've hit rock bottom. Where do I go from here? Talking about it was a huge thing. Being able to talk to my friend about it. And you see there's a lot of ads and stuff at the moment that talk about the importance of opening up and talking. And it is really important. You're making yourself vulnerable. So it's important to find those people that you really trust, that you really respect, who you know will talk to you in that way. And if not, go and see a GP and maybe find therapy or something like that. Someone you can talk to that's neutral, that you can just let it all out with. Be honest and open and make yourself vulnerable. There's no weakness in being vulnerable. In fact, it becomes a strength. It takes some courage at the beginning, but it builds into a strength. Now, of course, we've spoken on this channel before about the impact of the mental health conditions, because obviously I've found myself, through all that, we've spoken about where I was at. In the next year or so, I found the lady who is now my wife. I found a path for myself and started to see potential. And here I am, married. I've got 2 kids. We've made a life, and it's not been without its challenges, but it's a beautiful thing. And all that came about because I was able to start addressing those things in my life. But the reality is, mental health has really impacted our family. I didn't know it when I met my wife, and it's something that we discovered after the birth of our second child, my son, was that she's bipolar. She has what's called a bipolar affected disorder, which is there's 3 levels, if you like, of this: bipolar affected, schizophrenia, and it sort of sits somewhere in the middle of bipolar and schizophrenia. Has some of the elements of schizophrenia in there, and it's a little more challenging for her, I guess. Once my wife was diagnosed, we were able to start getting support for that, but it took a point for her to get to where she was able to be open to it too. And I think the key to mental health is us being able to open up. It's all very well having everybody ask, hey, are you okay? And it can be really confronting when people are asking you, okay? It's like, yeah, I'm fine, just leave me alone, I don't want to talk about it. But maybe being able to take somebody up on that and talk to them makes a real difference. Being able to open up in that way certainly made a huge difference for me. So with my son, we knew that my wife had gone through pretty severe postnatal depression after the birth of our daughter, and we were concerned. So I'd approached the neonatal team and said, this was something we faced before. I think there's a strong potential for this to happen again. Can you, what can we do to help prevent it? And that started us on a path to investigating. And I remember just in bed, my wife was really struggling, and I just said to her one night, do you think it might be bipolar? I know bipolar quite well. I think it's being a musician. Because I played guitar, I played in bands, there tends to be a lot of creativity that's associated with these conditions. It's a good way of expressing yourself creatively. A lot of people are artists, comedians, and musicians. And so I'd known a number of people in my life who had bipolar disorder, and they, it was, for each of them, it was being managed in whatever way, but I could just see similarities. And she actually stopped and said, you know what, I think you might be right. And so that started steering that pathway, if you like, down toward, okay, well, how can we help with this? What can we do to support you with this? And how can we make life better for you with this? And a lot of things sort of came out of the woodwork, personal things, which I won't go into here, but, things that affected that. And interestingly, what came out was that there's a link between undiagnosed autism in childhood, especially in women, and having mental health issues down the track, things like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, emotionally unstable personality disorder, or borderline personality disorder. It's called EUPD in the UK for some reason. It's borderline everywhere else in the world. With all those things in play, that can really be something that comes out, and the link between bipolar and autism is really quite strong. And at this point, of course, we knew that my daughter was likely autistic. We knew she was autistic. We were still going through the diagnosis process, and I've spoken about it before. It took us 8 years to get that diagnosis in place. It was absolutely ridiculous. Thankfully, a doctor had seen my daughter, and we were at the hospital. She stubbed her toe and it was gone all black, so we'd taken her in, and he was trying to work with her. She was reacting to, I don't want to be touched, freaking out. And he said, is she autistic? And it was, yeah, well, yes, she is, but it's not diagnosed. And he took the time to talk to me and say, these are really important, get this diagnosed because it can lead to bipolar disorder down the track, which is fascinating to me because it answered so many questions. It was one of those sort of moments all the jigsaw pieces fall into place and it really became very clear. I have so much respect for my wife because my wife battles with these things every day. She's been diagnosed with a number of disorders and physical health conditions as well. But she gets up and she fights every day, and that takes real strength. Now she's got support around her. Our mother and my mother-in-law, her mother, is amazing. She is really, really supportive and really there. Obviously, myself and the people around us, we do have that gift, if you like, of support from others. If you know people who are struggling, if you know that people are going through this kind of stuff, even if it's not diagnosed, but you can see it, make yourself available. I think the difficulty for so many of us, and I'm guilty of this in the past, before I found myself in this world, there was that sense of, I don't want to get involved with that, it's too much, it's just, I'm not, I don't have the resources or whatever. And yes, we have to look out for that with ourselves. You can't, if you get too invested in something and it can affect your own mental health, that's obviously a real negative. But I think sometimes it's that, just overcoming that initial discomfort, maybe the fact that you have to have a talk that just says, I've seen you struggling, are you okay? It can feel invasive, it can feel wrong for us to do that, but it's so necessary. And I think it's being able to say it once, leave it, but just leave it that it's open. I'm always here if you want to talk, just reach out, whatever, but I'm not going to continue harassing you about this, but if you need me, I'm here. And maybe every now and again, just reaching out. But being prepared to make that awkward first step can be so important in actually reaching someone and getting to where they're helped and supported. For my wife, what she was able to do was overcome that difficulty, that discomfort in discussing these things, and actually open herself up to something's not right and something has to be done. Much like I'd reached, so many years beforehand when I was in my depression. For my wife, this is something that's never going to go away. It's not curable. It's treatable. There are ways that can help, but anybody who knows anybody who's got any kind of disorder like this, like bipolar, it's never gone, and it will rear its head. I have a friend who was like 10 years, hadn't had any issues, was on the right medication and sorted, and genuinely felt like I've beaten this, it's gone, it's done. And then only a couple of years ago, it reared up again and he went into mania and had a really, really challenging time. It's never gone. It's never just vanished, but it can be treated. But it takes that step to say, I want to get that support. And you have that in you. If you're watching this and you're struggling with your mental health and you're struggling, reach out, talk to a GP, find somebody. There's so many charities and support charities for mental health. Mind come to mind straight away. They're fantastic. There are people out there who will support and help. My mum works for the Samaritans. She does the phones, and she can't tell me the stories of what she hears, but what she tells me is it was a hard one. We had a really hard one today, but we're getting there. And the work she's doing, working with mental health in that way, is fantastic. Working with the Samaritans, it's such an important thing, and your mental health matters. You matter, and I think that's what mental health does. Mental health's like the old devil and the angel on your shoulders, if you like. And on one shoulder you've got, you're good, you are, but you've got that over, and when we're in depression, I think the devil side grows, and it's getting in there in your ear more and more and speaking more negatively, coming back to that self-talk, telling you you're not worth it, you are worthless, there's something wrong with you, and no one likes, no one loves, no one cares for you. It all goes in your ears. That's what I experienced, was basically my fears of what everybody else thought were informing my own self-opinion, but it was actually the other way around. And everyone thought I was a great guy. They were wrong. I'm joking. But, everyone thought I was a great guy, but I couldn't see that. All I could see was the negative, and all I could hear was that voice telling me I wasn't worth it. I wasn't worthwhile. You are worthwhile. You are so valuable. You've got people in your life who rely on you and who need you. And if you feel alone, I promise you you're not. And there are options out there. And loneliness, I think, is the biggest informer of depression. It's the biggest informer of where we're at. And my experience becoming a SEN parent, with my daughter's diagnosis and knowing the challenges she faces, we can feel so isolated. A while back on the Facebook group I run, we'd hit 20,000 subscribers, I think it was, 20,000 members of the group. I asked people just to do a short bit, like type something or do a short video of if the group's helped, how has it helped? Let us know, just tell us your story. And without exception, every single person that wrote something back included in there somewhere, I don't feel so alone. To the point that I actually labelled the video we did with it, collating all together, not alone. And it really struck me that that's exactly how people feel now. We've got 45,000 members on that group now, and it's still the prevailing thing is that we feel alone. There's actually other people going through what we're going through. Connecting with people in that way is so important. And Facebook groups and things like that can really help. Be careful because often, internet and trolls and people want to make things worse. But if you can find a good mental health group, if you're struggling with that, people that you can talk to and open up with, it makes a huge difference and it can be a really fantastic thing. I will put in the description a link of charities and places you can phone to call. That will be in the description, but it's really, really helpful. I'll try and put a card up as well, and you can just click on that if you need it, and it'll take you straight there as well. You matter. And that's the point I really want to make, is that you matter. And interestingly enough, I'm partnered with the Disability Expo now, and that's something that's really been a big thing. And it's fantastic. And they have started the hashtag I matter. I think that's a really important thing. I think when you look at World Mental Health Day, that's what you have to take away is I matter. You matter. We matter. Everybody has their part and place in this world. That's what I wanted to say. I wanted to reach out and just let you know that, we all go through it. I had a friend talk to me yesterday who's going through a hard time and say to me, you never seem to struggle. And I think maybe we mask it well. Maybe we hide it. Maybe the fact that we only see people at their best. Social media does this to you, isn't it? Everyone puts their best step forward. You only see what people want you to see, and we see the links between Instagram and all the stereotype images of what a person should look like and be like and how your life should be. Do you have money? My kids watch these videos and they're all, YouTube videos with people who are rich and wealthy and spending challenges and all this kind of stuff. And it's this fantasy world that for the most of the society doesn't exist. Most of society now is facing the cost of living crisis. And that's another thing that's impacting, all these things they stress. And, we go through depression because something's wrong. And that's where I want to finish, is that idea that depression is a form of pain. I read a fantastic book a long while ago that was focused on pain and the importance of pain. And what they said in this book was leprosy is the opposite of pain. We see leprosy as being this really bad, dangerous illness. And it is, it's a disease. What they discovered is, people associated with parts of you falling off and all that kind of stuff, what they discovered was actually leprosy is simply a deadening of the nerves. You start to not feel. You're not receiving pain. So your body doesn't know something's wrong because it exists in a lot of, developing countries and stuff like that. The reason parts are falling off isn't because they're rotting away from a skin disease. It's actually the animals like rats are gnawing bits off and they don't realise because they can't feel it in their sleep. People will, try and force a door, and when you do that and it's too much, you get a pain signal back and you respond to that. If that's not working, you carry on going and you're doing damage to yourself, and that's where things can get infected, and that's where it looks like it's a skin disease. It's these sorts of things. We're not aware of the pain. So if I touch a hot pan, it's hot. I'm going to take away, and I'm going to learn from that. If your body isn't telling you that's hot and it's damaging, you're going to start burning your skin. Pain's really important because it's telling us, it's feeding back to us that something's wrong. And mental health, when we're in a bad place in our mental health, that's a form of pain, and it's telling us something's wrong. Maybe it's something wrong with the way we're seeing ourselves. Maybe it's something wrong in our lives. Maybe we're struggling with money. Maybe we have these frustrations. There are things we can do about all this stuff. If money struggles, there are charities out there that can really help. and consolidate debts and all that kind of stuff and really put you in a better place. Reach out, talk to somebody. And if you know someone who's going through any kind of hardship, just make sure they know you're there. Don't make it, really, you clearly need me. Because that kind of, it's like, no, hey, I'm here. If you ever need anything, I'm here when you're ready. But I'm here right now if you want that too. Reach out because you matter. You matter. Thanks for joining me. I won't say any more on that. I think that's my story. It's my bit of my family story and what we've gone through. But I really hope it's helped somebody out there. Please, if this helped, hit subscribe, ring the bell so that you know when new content's coming up. But more importantly, if you've got stories that you want to share, if you want to reach out, please do put the comments in. Please do list it and share it with other people. The more we're sharing our own stories, I think the more we get that point. And remember the hashtag I matter because you matter. I'll see you again on the next episode, but in the meantime, please do stay safe.